Voice is the form of a verb that implies when a grammatical subject performs the action or is the receiver of the action. When a sentence is written in active voice, the subject performs the action. Example: Men eshikni açtım. I opened the door. This is an active sentence where the subject is men, I, and the aç, to open, is the verb. So the subject men performs the action. When a sentence is written in passive voice, the subject receives the action. An example: Esik açıldı. The door is opened. This is a passive sentence where esik, door, is the subject and the açıl, be opened, is the verb. But the doer is not mentioned, since it is unnecessary. Active sentences are about what people or things do, while passive sentences are about what happens to the people or things. Active and the passive are two grammatical voices in English. However, the Kazakh voice is more complex than those of in English. In addition to active, there are 4 voice markers in Kazakh, such as passive, causative, reflexive, and the reciprocal. This video is about how to express passive, reflexive, and the reciprocal voices in Kazakh. In Kazakh, when the subject is doer of the action, the verb is in the active voice. In this case, the verb takes the tense and the personal markers. For instance, Men kitapты okudum. I read the book. This is an active sentence whose subject is men, I. The verb is oku, to read, which takes simple past marker the and the first person singular ending When the subject is the patient or undergoer of the action, the verb should be in the passive voice. An example: Kitap okuldu. The book was read. Here the subject is kitap, book, that is the undergoer of the action. The verb is okuldu, was read, where the verb stem oku, to read, takes the passive voice past tense suffix the, and the third person singular, which has no ending. The passive voice is used when you want to emphasize the action and the object of a sentence rather than the subject. Simply put, the subject is either less important than the action itself or that you don't know who or what the subject is. The passive voice is expressed by adding l, il, and the n, to the verb stem. Namely, if the stem ends in vowels and the consonants other than l, you should use l, or il. The suffix l comes when the stem is ended in vowels. Example: Bastaldı, be started, and the l and the il are used when the stem is ended in consonants, depending on whether the stem ends in a back or front syllable. Example: Kesil, be cut, yazıl, be written. If the stem is ended in l, la, le, you should use the endings n, or n, depending on its last syllables. For example, alın, be taken, ilin, be hung, dayarlan, be prepared, söylen, be spoken. It should be noted that only transitive verbs can take passive suffixes. The intransitive verbs such as bar, to go, kill, to come, jugur, to run, yuhta, to sleep, and so on, cannot take passive suffix. The tense and the personal markers come after the passive voice, so you can tell when the action is taking place. For instance, kitap okuldu, the book was read, where the is past tense marker. In the passive sentence, kitap okuladı, the book will be read. A is present or future tense, so the action will be carried out in the future. While kitap okulgan, the book has been read, is the passive present perfect, that the action has been performed in the past with the present relevance. If the verb is to be in the negative form, then the negation ma, me, ba, be, pa, pe comes directly after the passive voice, before the tenses. For instance, esik açılmadı, the door wasn't opened. This is a passive, simple past tense. Ыдыс-аяқ жуылмаған еді. The dishes had not been washed. This is a passive, past perfect sentence. I have prepared a few examples which may help you understand the passive voice. Бұл мақала кеше жазылыпты. Apparently, this article has been written yesterday. Нәрселер машинаға салынды. The stuff was put in the car. Бұл хат ертең жіберіледі. This letter will be sent tomorrow. Бүгін дүкендер ерте жабылады. Today the shops will be closed early. Алыстан оның дауысы естілді. His or her voice was heard from a distance. Reflexive voice, also known as middle voice, are the verbs whose subject performs an action that is directed to the subject, which is to say, the action of the verb is both committed and received by the same person or thing. In this sentence, мен жуындым, I washed myself. Жуын is a reflexive verb because I cannot wash anyone but myself. Therefore, the subject and the direct object of the reflexive verb жуын is the same, мен, I. If you know about German, German also has a lot of reflexive verbs, such as sich bewegen, to move, sich freuen, to be happy, sich treffen, to meet. In Kazakh, the reflexive voice is expressed by adding the endings n, n to the verb stem. In particular, if the stem ends in vowel, the variant n follows it. Example, taran, come yourself. When the stem ends in a consonant in back vocalic, the form n is used. Example, жуын, wash yourself. If the stem ends in a consonant in front vocalic, the form n appears. Example, киін, dress yourself. There are only a few verbs which can take reflexive suffixes. For instance, қырын, shave oneself, оран, wrap oneself, шешін, undress oneself, сілкін, shake oneself, тартын, pull oneself, мақтан, praise oneself, безен, get dressed up oneself, күтін, take care of oneself, сезін, feel oneself, қорған, protect oneself, сақтан, prevent oneself, and so on. Akin to passive voice, the reflexive voice immediately comes after the verb stem, and the negation, tense, and the personal markers occur after reflexive voice. For instance, ол жақсы күтінбеді. He or she did not take care of herself or himself, where the verb stem could, to wait or to take care, takes the reflexive suffix n, the negation be, and the simple past tense the, and the third person ending, which is empty. Please note that Kazakh reflexive verbs do not need reflexive pronouns. At this point, you may be wondering, both passive and the reflexive voices have the same ending, n, and n, so how do we differentiate from each other? Well, it depends on the context. In other words, if the action is performed by a third person and it is not mentioned, it must be passive sentence. For instance, söz söylendi, the word was spoken. This is definitely a passive sentence, since there must be an agent or a doer who speaks. The word cannot speak itself. On the other hand, if the subject and the direct objects are the same, it must be reflexive. An example, мен киіндім, I dressed up myself. In this sentence, the performer and the receiver of the action is the same person, мен, I. You can dress up yourself if you are a grown-up. As I said, only a few verbs can take the reflexive suffixes, but most of the transitive verbs can take the passive voice. I have a few examples of a reflexive voice for you to practice. Ат сылкынды, the horse shook or shuddered itself. Ол жуынып болған соң тағы жарты сағаттай безенеді. After taking a shower, he or she dresses up for about half an hour. Bala көрпеде оранып отыр. The child sat there wrapped in a quilt. Ол қырынып, таранып, шығып кетті. He shaved, combed his hair and went out. The last voice marker we learned today is the reciprocal voice. Reciprocal voice, also known as cooperative voice, refers to the action being performed by two or more than two people together. In other words, it involves more than one person completing the action together. Reciprocal voice can express mutual relationships. Kazakh has special reciprocal suffixes for verbs. For example, biz алдыңғы аптада көрістік. We saw each other last week. This sentence has more than one participant, so that the action is performed by those participants together, expressing mutual action. Unlike Kazakh, English doesn't have special verb forms for reciprocal voice, so English uses reciprocal pronouns such as each other to convey a mutual relation. The reciprocal is expressed by adding the suffixes s, us, and s to the verb stem. Namely, when the stem ends in a vowel, the form s appears. Example, сөйлес, to speak each other. Tanış, to know each other. When the verb stem ends in a consonant in back vocalic, the variant s occurs. Example, айтыс, to argue with each other. Atış, to fight with each other. When the stem ends in a consonant in front vocalic, the suffix is appears. Example, kulus, to laugh each other. Süyüs, to kiss each other. Kazakh has quite a number of verbs which contains reciprocal suffix in their formation, since the action they express involves more than one subject. I can mention some of them here. Sırlas, to confide in. Кездес, to meet. Бірлес, to unite. Ақылдас, to discuss. Татулас, to harmony or reconcile. Амандас, to greet, and so on. Note that these are the verb roots, which are derived from nouns. Like other voices mentioned earlier, the reciprocal suffix comes right after the verb stem. The negation, tense, and the personal markers appear after the reciprocal suffix. Олар таныспайды. They don't know each other. In this sentence, the verb stem tanı, to know or to recognize, takes the reciprocal voice s, the negation pa, the present tense i, and the third person ending the. It may be better to know there is another way of expressing mutual action using the reciprocal pronouns bir, birin, or birin, biri, each other, instead of using the reciprocal verbs. If you want to use the reciprocal pronouns, you don't need your verbs in the reciprocal suffix. For instance, олар bir-birin tanımайды. They don't know each other. You also can use the reciprocal suffix on the verb instead of reciprocal pronouns. Олар таныспайды. They don't know each other. Both expressions are correct. Examples. Ол екеуі соғысып қалды. They both fought or they both had a fight. Here the stem is соқ, to hate or to beat. Айгүл мен Айнұр қолтықтасып келе жатыр. Айгүл and Айнұр are coming arm in arm. Біз кеше ғана таныстық. We just knew each other yesterday. Сіздер басшымен сөйлестіңіздер ме? Have you spoken with the leader? Мен оның жүгін көтерісіп бердім. I helped him or her carry his or her luggage. In this video, you have learned about the passive, reflexive, and the reciprocal voices in Kazakh. The causative voices will be explained in the next video, as they are more complex and have many variations. I hope you enjoyed the video and thank you for watching.